Turning point. History is not history on the day that it happens. We only learn of its significance years later when TV documentaries fill out the details that news reports omitted. 22nd of October 1962 was no different from any other day at this boarding school where schedules sufficiently stifled any deviation to free thinkers. At first, Meredith had bucked at the restrictions and clockwork monotony, but now she took comfort in the realisation that she did not need to think for herself. Each day began with a bell and ended with a bell, and all the bells in between. No need to think of what to wear. Each day was the same prim navy tunic with cream blouse. Stockings, hat and gloves concealed any flesh that could show an outbreak of individuality. No need to think of what to eat. Each morning the dining room issued the same aromas: porridge, burnt toast, and according to the day of the week, sausages, cheese rarebit, baked beans, or on Sunday, bacon and eggs. No need to think of such matters. In here, they were protected from the real world. Out there, where she could just discern the faint clatter of traffic beyond the high brick wall, families bickered over who was last in the bathroom. That was where ordinary girls ran for the school bus and were teased by the boy next door, where teachers asked stupid questions like, "Amanda, how could the dog eat your assignment? You don't have a dog." She had got used to this comforting clockwork, and the real world had become the unreal, and so this was her reality. 22nd of October 1962 was no different from any other day. 11:45 a.m. on was the French, and the girls from the boarding section were usually allowed out a few minutes before the day girls by the custom of raising a hand and declaring "J'ai faim." Then the teacher would reply "Oui," and the girl would be dismissed to walk up the hill to the home dining room. 22nd of October was no different from the usual timetable until the boarders were asked to leave the class 10 minutes earlier to go to lunch. Ordinarily, this would have cheered Meredith, as any opportunity to show up the day girls was a lark. But now that she was locked into the safeness of proper scheduling, this deviation filled her with unease. The bell had not rung yet. The bell always told them when to attend lunch. She joined her friend Tina to walk across the sports oval and up to the boarding home. As she filed into the warm-smelling dining room, Tuesday was lamb roast day. Some of her assurance returned. Everything looked as it should. Each girl had gone to her allotted table and stood behind her allotted chair to wait for the grace to be said. The headmistress marched in precisely followed by a gaggle of room mistresses. There was a grimness to their faces that stirred again a flutter of unease in the pit of her stomach. It was squelched as the usual grace began, and then and there was an add-on. "We ask you, Lord, to keep those in power safe in your care, so that the right decisions can be carried out. Amen." What the heck did that mean? Before any girl had the chance to move, the headmistress continued, "I have requested an early lunch today, as there is an important news broadcast I wish you to hear before your meal. Please be seated." As the shuffling of chairs lessened, the ABC News theme music broke over the room. Then she heard the clear, strong voice of the President of the United States. J.F. Kennedy declared that an ultimatum had been given to Cuba, and if it was not met, then a state of war would exist between America and the USSR. Immediately the room was filled with commotion. The girl beside Meredith broke into rending sobs. Meredith looked about her with curiosity. Why was this news affecting them all so dramatically? Wasn't America on the other side of the globe? So what if they all wanted to kill each other? It was not war yet, only potentially so. She turned to the sobbing senior girl and asked, "Why are you so upset?" The older girl looked at her in a condescending superiority and said, "There is going to be a war." "Yes, but why are you crying?" "You don't understand. My brother will have to join, and he will be killed." This sort of logic was not at all as logical to her as it seemed to be for others. She sat and mused it over, but still could not share in this mass hysteria. It simply did not make sense. The present was scary enough. Why project yourself into the future just to wallow in self-pity? Lunch was sort of subdued. She did not mind. The lack of her table's appetite allowed her 2 extra serves of bread and butter pudding. However, the rest of the day upset her. Not the news of the impending doom, but the obvious distress that it seemed to give her fellow boarders. It upset her to see them so upset. She pondered how to voice her opinion that for now it was just hot air without hurting their feelings. At last she thought of a way of digging fun at Khrushchev and Kennedy. One of the latest pop songs involved a beautiful maiden protected from the world by a jealous father with the help of the birds and the bees of Wolverton Mountain. She sat and hummed over the tune a few times until the names of the 2 great presidents of the day fitted in nicely. It was then a simple matter to add a few lines of humour. Before she could stop, it had grown into a ballad of some distinction. She showed it to her best friend, Tina, who smiled as she read out the words. It was a joy to see her face change from concern to happiness once more. Tina showed it to another, and then another, until her whole dormitory was laughing at the absurd fun she had made of the 2 leaders. The balance of harmony and schedule had been restored. As the bell tolled her for lights out in the night of the 22nd of October, she did not give another thought to the Cuban crisis. The unreal world had receded, and her real world was now secure. She woke to the usual bell and dressed in her usual uniform. Life here was so predictably safe. Before the usual breakfast, cheese rarebit on Wednesdays, they were to have the usual dress inspections while standing outside their dorms. Today was not usual. There was some commotion in the senior sections. The headmistress was interviewing each dormitory. Being in the youngest section, their dormitory had to wait some time for the group of teachers to work their way down to this part of the home. No one had been dismissed. Each girl was still standing outside their room. This was not usual. At last the teachers had reached their section. With a face contorted with worry lines, the headmistress held forth a ragged piece of paper with neat lines of poetry across it. "Someone has been making fun of the present world situation and the President of the United States. Do any of you know who wrote this?" Meredith knew her mark clearly, but could see no reason for concern. It was just poetry. "It is mine." A look of disbelief filled the teacher's face. "You wrote this?" "Yes, Miss Bird." She did not seem convinced. "Who helped you?" "I just did it." "You will be in more trouble if you are not telling the truth." "Why should I lie?" Still not believing, she dismissed the whole school but told Meredith to go into her office and wait for her. Meredith liked this office. The old, ceiling-high windows gave a rare view of the outside world. She could see the trams running down Vulture Street and ordinary people rushing off to ordinary work. Unreal people. Miss Bird entered with her form teacher. She showed Mrs. Guthridge the poem and asked, "Is this her writing?" "It looks like it." This annoyed Meredith somewhat. If she had already confessed, why would they insist on the suspicion of a lie? "I wrote it. It was not being disrespectful to anyone in particular. I don't even know the President Kennedy or Mr. Khrushchev. I just wanted to make the other girls smile again. You upset them by making them listen to that news thing. I made them laugh." She was suddenly silent, realizing that she had spoken out of turn. The two teachers before her were also silent. There was a different look on their faces. "You may go back to your class. You are dismissed." The day reverted to schedule. Her life returned to the cocooned safeness of bells and regular meals, regular schooling, regular church, even regular relaxation. Years later, when she left the school, she became pregnant on her first date with the first boy with whom she had been allowed out with. The union had led to a sort of unreal romance, but the pregnancy was permanent. Her married life was happy enough in an unreal way. She watched as her children grew, and her husband eventually ran off with her daughter's sports teacher. 20 years after she left school, she vacantly switched on a TV documentary of the Cuban crisis. In stunned shock, she watched as the full story hit her. At last it was real. Those idiots really were ready to blow up the whole world. The end.